president. And of course, we were here today with two authorities in the area of the PPP and others, and I'll have Jill to introduce them. But before we do, we want to welcome everyone here today on this 30th day of April 2020. And we thank all of those who are on the line and those who will come on the line. So we thank you for your time today. And today we're going to hear about the U.S. stimulus packet, the second round. So with that aside, we want to make sure that everyone has the information that's needed to help them along the way. I submitted something inside of the chat, and if you can respond to that later on after you have your presentation made and finished, then I'd like to hear some discussion on that as well. So Jill, take it away, please.
Thank you. So once again, joining us today is Javier Marin. He's the Director of Business Development and Global Trade at the Central Florida Development Council. And his sidekick, during this pandemic, once again, is Carl Hadden. He's the Associate Director of the Florida Small Business, for Florida for the Small Business Development Council. And they were with us before, but since then we've had the second stimulus monies released, and we want to hopefully take advantage of that. And since some of it was targeted towards Black-owned businesses, this is really helpful as well. So take it away, guys.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jill and Doris, for the introduction. Javier Marin with the Central Florida Development Council, and many of you question why the guy who's in global trade and foreign investment is talking about financing. Well, in my previous life, I was in banking for almost 23 years, and I was also a consultant. Carl and I were counterparts at the Small Business Development Centers at the Florida SBDC in Tampa that covers 10 counties, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. So let me just do a quick introduction of the Central Florida Development Council. We are Polk County's Economic Development Partnership, and our mission is to support an economy that's based on sustainable businesses. And so part of our four pillars are to promote Polk County as the best place to do business in Florida, and of course to develop strategic initiatives. But the two most critical ones today are to advocate for key business issues and to facilitate collaborative partnerships. So we have partnered with the SBDC and other groups to be able to kind of bring the message out. We don't do anything that has to do with actual preparation of documentations or loans, but at least we're able to provide information and guidance on how people may be able to take advantage of some of the incentives that are available. And so with that, let's move on to Carl so he can do his introduction and tell us about SBDC.
Javier, thank you. And just to echo what Javier said, I appreciate y'all inviting us to come on the call and talk about what's going on with the small business community in our communities, because I know Javier and I are both residents of Polk County, and we're personally invested in the success of our neighbors and friends who are entrepreneurs in this area. But a little bit about the Florida SBDC at USF. We're part of a nationwide network of America's SBDC centers that provide small business support services in all 50 states and U.S. territories. The state of Florida is broken up into 9 regions, as for those who can see on the screen. And of course, USF is right there in the Southwest Central Florida region. So we cover 10 counties, including Polk, which is where I live. And we have 40 centers and about 50 outreach. If you go to the next slide, Javier. And this one shows kind of where some of our offices are dispersed amongst our 10 county region. We have 2 locations in Polk. We have an office that serves the Heartland and Highlands and Sardi DeSoto, and then several offices that serve our counties to the west, and they're listed there. One more slide. The services that we provide are primarily confidential, no-cost consulting. One more, Javier. And this is a list of all of the topic areas that we assist. Oh, back one. I guess there was a lag on my screen. We assist businesses, 12 months out of the year with or without a disaster. And these are a lot of the areas of expertise and assistance we do provide. Everything from somebody wanting to start up a business, to government contracting, to social media marketing. But I highlighted the areas that are in of immediate need right now in the time of disaster. And that's where we help businesses with business continuity assistance, financial management, capital access through the different programs that are available right now at the as far as relief programs. And most importantly, I think, is cash flow management, because what we do with the cash that we have now is going to help determine if we're going to be able to withstand the downturn that we're experiencing today. Can you move forward one? Our business consulting services are confidential. When we meet with a client, sorry, somebody else was calling me, not trying to video in. When we do meet with a client, it's completely confidential. We don't share that information outside of our organization, so that we can dig into the inner workings of a company and they can feel confident that we're there to assist them. Also, that's absolutely no cost to the business owner. And our role is to be an advocate for the client, because the more successful our client business is, that's our ultimate goal at the end of the day. And we work with for-profit, small and medium-sized businesses, and all of our consultants are professional, full-time paid consultants who have both practical and theoretical business experience. And what that means is not only do they have a formal post-secondary education with a degree in a business concentration at the bachelor or master's level, but they've all either owned or managed businesses of their own. So they've been in the seat that our business owner clients are in now, and they understand the challenges that those businesses are facing. One more slide, Javier. And this, just a summary, this is kind of the mission and vision of our organization. Our mission is to provide businesses with the expertise and resources they need to succeed. And our vision is to create a better Florida for all by helping businesses grow, because a healthy, vibrant small business community is what's going to help our local communities in our state. And our website is listed there, sbdctampabay.com/polk, to get additional information. And with that, Javier, I'll hand it back. Javier, you're still muted.
Thanks, Carl. It would have been awkward to be going for 10 minutes without knowing that you guys couldn't hear me. So we will kind of brush up on what's new and exciting about the CARES Act, the second round. But more importantly, I think we're going to touch upon everything that's available, just in case there are people on the line that are not aware of the programs that are available. So let's get started. We do have the federal relief programs and some Florida programs such as reemployment. So with that said, let's start with the CARES Act. By now, I understand that about 80 million people have received their $1,200 checks for individuals and $500 per child under 17. It's all based on your 2018 tax returns if you haven't filed 2019. If you have done your 2019 and they have your routing number and account number, you should have gotten it on your account already. If they had the incorrect account number and sent it to a closed account, then the IRS will be sending a check, and checks will start being sent out, I believe this week or next week. I know Social Security recipients started receiving direct deposit last week, and it's going into this week and next week. But don't be surprised if you don't get a check until September. That's unfortunately how long it's going to take, because I believe they can only do about 4 million checks per week. So they expect to be busy sending out the checks for those people that were unable to get direct deposit. If the IRS didn't have your direct deposit information, maybe because you paid as opposed to getting a refund with your 2018 or 2019 taxes, then you should be able to go into their website and include your ABA routing number and your account number so they can expedite it. It's of course phased out based on your income. So if you earn as a single filer 75,000 or more, or if you file a joint return, if you're married and filed a joint return, then it's going to be $150,000. And the good thing is that the checks to individuals are not taxable, so we will not have to pay taxes on that income next year. So the small business relief is the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, as we all got to know it. It's available for companies with 500 employees or less, and of course, it's going to follow SBA size standards. That means that some businesses may qualify when they have more than 500 employees. And of course, it's also available to nonprofit organizations that are 501c3s or 501c19s. However, 501c6s, such as chambers of commerce, are not eligible for this type of program. It is our understanding that Congress is looking at another round of the CARES Act or stimulus package, and we are expecting that 501c6s will be included in future funding. It's very important to remember that the business must have been operational as of February 15th of this year, and so that the PPP is an SBA loan, but you get it through your bank, and you can only take advantage of one PPP loan. The initial rate is 1%. I know the SBA had announced previously that it could go as high as 4%, but we have really seen 1% in most loans. We'll talk a little bit about that because a portion of it is a forgiveness loan. Excuse me. So how much can you request? You would basically average your payroll expenses, including benefits, vacation, and sick leave for 2019. And once you average it for the month, you would multiply that amount by 2.5 times. So if your payroll was $120,000, your average would be $10,000, and you can apply for $25,000. That would be 2.5 times. And so the idea is that you should be able to cover your payroll for 8 weeks plus, and that's where the 0.5 comes into play, plus rent or mortgage insurance and utilities. That's why it's 2.5 times your payroll as opposed to just 2 times your payroll. And the amount that is forgiven is as long as you spend the money for mortgage interest, rent, utilities, and payroll, as long as at least 75% of the amount that you received goes into payroll, then you will get a forgiveness of that portion, whatever is not forgiven. And that will be a conversation you will have with the bank later, because there's really no clarification from SBA on how the forgiveness portion will apply. But we have 6 to 12 months to think about that. So for now, the SBA is really interested in just getting funds to people's accounts. So whatever remains after the forgiveness loan goes into play, then you'll have a year to start paying it. Now, it's important to know that the first round of funding was actually exhausted within 2 weeks. And there was an issue with, well, as expected, we do have a lot of businesses in the US, and the amount of money that was allocated, so wasn't enough. There was a question about, well, did large banks take advantage? They absolutely did. There is one thing though, as we understand, the SBA system that's being used for this type of program does not take a batch of applications. So basically every institution needs to do one application at a time. So that was an advantage to kind of spread it out throughout the different banks. But of course, if large banks have 1,000 people that are working on PPP and smaller banks have 25 people working on PPP, that tells you how many applications are going in for each institution. Additionally, the SBA opened the window for only small banks and community banks and credit unions yesterday at 4:30 through 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. So only small banks would be able to enter applications in order to give the opportunity for those smaller community-based organizations to be able to enter their PPP applicants. The good thing is once the whole application has been reviewed and it's deemed by the bank to be complete, they can go in and get an automatic approval. Again, there was an issue about larger organizations taking advantage of PPP, and I think SBA has been trying to address that. And of course, a lot of organizations have been shamed into returning the funding, so that most of the money goes to small businesses as opposed to large organizations. So let's talk about what is required. Number one, you must certify that the funds will be used for payroll, mortgage, interest, or rent, and utilities, that your business has been impacted by COVID-19, which I think most businesses, if not all, can prove that. You need tax documentation and payroll documentation. If you use a payroll service, they're already prepared to give you the reports that are needed. And so the payroll service is the best way to go in terms of getting the documentation that you'll need to apply. And the Form 1099s, income statement Schedule C for sole proprietors. So as we know, the program is available to all type of businesses, including sole proprietors and contractors. What is not requested is collateral. As you know, most SBA loans require collateral and a personal guarantee. Well, PPP does not require it, so that is good news. As long as you can certify that you have a business, that you were in business as of February 15th, that you had employees, and that you had expenses that need to be covered, then you would qualify. You don't need to do a personal guarantee or collateral.
Javier, before you move off
yes.
of the PPP, I did want to make a comment. Javier mentioned in his explanation, and he's totally correct, that you can only receive one PPP loan per business. But you can apply for PPP loans at more than one financial institution. So if you've applied at a bank and you're getting nowhere with that bank, you can apply to another participating bank. The thing is, whichever bank gets that loan through the SBA first is the one that will fund the loan, and the other one will get kicked out. So you will only receive one loan, but you can apply for multiple banks if you're not getting the responsive from your current bank. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks for that clarification. And additionally, you cannot use funds that you get from other sources, such as the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, for PPP expenses, because then that would be disqualified. So in a sense, you need to make sure that for the 8-week window that's covered by PPP, you pay your payroll, your utilities, and rent or mortgage interest exclusively from PPP. So those can be forgiven. Otherwise, they would be disqualified from forgiveness if you use any other funds, such as EIDL, for instance. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So some of the additional provisions from the CARES Act include mortgage where foreclosures and evictions are delayed by 60 days. And multifamily owners can request 3 30-day forbearance periods on their mortgages, as long as they were current on their February 1st payments. There is an unemployment extension. Now it actually reads 4 months, but we'll have to clarify on that. Where in addition to the $275 Florida weekly payment for unemployment benefit, there is an additional $600 that's coming from the COVID relief fund. The eligibility includes independent contractors, freelancers, and non-traditional workers, which wasn't the case in the past. So it's open to a lot of people, and that means that if you're an independent contractor, you have the choice of going for PPP or going, in general, PPP probably won't cover much, but for EIDL and for unemployment. You just can't take advantage of two programs, and such as PPP and unemployment at the same time. So we need to be careful with that. And it's also expanded to furlough employees and part-time employees, again, that were not traditionally approved under the unemployment program. The maximum duration is 25 weeks from 12 weeks. So there is an additional 13-week period that's covered under COVID. So in addition to the $600 per week, there is a provision for 12 additional weeks. And we had gotten information previously that there were over 6 million applications for unemployment in Florida. However, the state came back and clarified that there were a lot of duplicate applications. So the number, as we understand, is 1.8 million unemployment applications. And that's actually not March 15th, but as of 5 days ago. So we need to correct that. Because there were some issues with the online application system. The governor added servers to the program. They're supposed to be able to take about 120,000 applications at a given time. They also have a handheld or a mobile application, and they have paper applications. The state is currently reviewing over 100,000 paper applications as a result of the electronic system not working. Unfortunately, only about 25% of the applications are being processed, and only about 87% of that 27% has been funded. So we know that we have an issue with processing times. There is a serious delay on the state side for the unemployment. We understand that it is being addressed, but it's coming along very slowly. It's been very painful for most people. Carl, do you want to take the CARES Act tax incentives?
Absolutely. Thank you, Javier. As we talked about PPP and the additional funding, you know, there's going to be more demand for PPP than there's going to be dollars in the program. So there are some incentives in addition to PPP. So if for some reason your company does not qualify or is not able to get PPP, you should definitely look at these tax incentives. These tax incentives can be combined with an EIDL loan or the economic injury disaster loan, but they cannot be combined with the PPP. So just keep that in mind. The first one is the employee retention credit for employers that were subject to closure or experience economic hardship. You can Google that, or there's a link in the presentation. And I believe the presentation, Javier, is going to be going out following the call. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, we'll do a PDF and send it out.
So folks will have this link, so don't try to write it down as fast as you can. You'll get a copy of it. But it's a fully refundable tax credit equal to 50% of qualified wages, including some health aid after March 12th, but before January 1st of 2021. So the max qualified wages is $10,000. So the max credit per employee is $5,000. So to qualify, you have to be a business that was ordered closed by the government, or a business that remained open, but your revenues dropped by 50% compared to the previous year. The second tax incentive that was part of the CARES Act is the delay of payment of employer payroll taxes. And the slide hasn't advanced on my screen yet, Javier. But what that one does is it allows the business owner to defer payment of the employer portion of the payroll taxes for Social Security and certain railroad retirement taxes through, that should say December 31st. It's a typo, apologies. But you can defer those payments for the rest of this calendar year, which means that's cash that you can keep within your business instead of paying it out. Now, it's not a forgiveness of those taxes, it's a deferral. So the way that you'll pay that back is in two payments, one payment at the end of 2021 and the second payment at the end of 2022, both 50% of whatever the amount is that you deferred. So that will help businesses who may have payroll taxes due currently, and it'll also help when we get reopened, hopefully in the next short period of time, you can continue to defer those taxes through the end of the year. So as you're putting people back to work, that's going to lessen your tax burden for the rest of this calendar year, improving the cash flow of the business.
All right, so let's take it up with the economic injury disaster loan. Florida received its declaration, and it sounds like a long time ago, March 18th. And it's funded and managed by the Small Business Administration directly. As we mentioned before, PPP is handled by local banks. However, the economic injury disaster loan is handled directly by the SBA. And so the basic premise of the EIDL, as we got to know it, is that you may be able to borrow up to $2 million at an interest rate of 3.75%. Now, if you're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, you'll be able to get a rate of 2.75%. And the term is actually very flexible. It can go up to 30 years based on your cash flow and SBA's determination of your ability to repay. The eligibility is very basic, demonstrated economic loss. So that is it's almost a given that most businesses should be able to qualify for it. The approval and closing has become an issue. Historically, these loans take 5 to 6 weeks. There is a component, which is the $10,000 draw or $1,000 per employee, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But the approval and closing has been taking a lot longer than we've expected. And we'll talk a little bit about as we have additional discussion. There is a footnote on FEMA because companies needed to certify that they had registered with FEMA in the past. That is not the case anymore. So you just go to SBA, to their website, and you apply for the loan. The advantage of the EIDL is that it has been funded again on this second round of funding through Congress. You do have the same business eligibility as the PPP, which means 500 employees or less. On the draw, which is $1,000 per employee or $10,000. And they say that they'll be able to send that out within 3 days. Unfortunately, that has not happened. It's taking more like 3 to 4 weeks before they send out the $10,000 draw. So I know some companies that applied in late March, beginning of April, are just beginning to get their $10,000 draw now. That means two things. Number one, the application is complete. And number two, someone is starting to work on it. So within the next 2 weeks, if you have received the draw, you should expect a call from SBA within the next 2 weeks from a representative that's going to walk you through the rest of your loan process.
One thing, Javier, I actually spoke with a client last week who had applied for the EIDL cash advance, and he had no notification from the SBA. He just happened to look at his bank account, and he had $4,000 more than he had the day before.
Yeah.
And he still hasn't heard from the SBA. But I told him that obviously that's a good sign. It means that they've started processing it, and that he should hope to get a decision on the remainder of his loan very shortly. And keep in mind that any advance on that loan application that's a forgivable portion of the loan. In this client's case, he had applied for $10,000. So the $4,000 that he was advanced, he will not have to pay that back. if he,
Mhm.
whether he's approved or not approved for the remaining 6,000. If they do approve the remaining 6,000, then that will be issued to them and him in the form of a loan, where at the 3.75%, and he would have to repay that portion. So that's kind of how that will work. So any portion that's advanced is forgiven, the rest is a loan.
Mhm.
And
And
the way
so,
it's set up is if he's approved for that $6,000 loan, the SBA will allow him to draw down off of it, kind of like a line of credit for up to 6 months. So they'll ask him, well, how much do you need right now? If he says, well, I just need $2,000, they'll advance him $2,000, and then he can still have $4,000 in reserve for up to 6 months, and then the loan finalizes, and they'll amortize it out from there. So it's almost like a line of credit. So you don't have to take all of the money or any of the money, depending on how quickly your business recovers. So just because you applied, let's say you applied for a larger loan, you apply for a $100,000 loan. If you're approved, that does not mandate that you go $100,000 in debt. If you only needed 30 and you pulled down 30, then the other 70 just goes away and your loan is for 30.
and so thanks, Carl. That was perfect. And so on the forgiveness portion, you can apply for EIDL and PPP. Remember, you can't spend the same monies for the same purposes, but you can apply for both. The only thing is whatever funds you get from PPP, from the cash advance, the $10,000 cash advance, whether it's 10 or 1 or 4, that portion will reduce your PPP because you can only take advantage of one grant. So in a sense, if you got $4,000 for a cash advance on EIDL, and you would qualify for $20,000 on EIDL, on PPP, your PPP will be reduced by those $4,000 because you got another grant. So the idea is to just keep the grant to be maximized at whatever the PPP is, while you have the opportunity to repay both EIDL or to borrow through EIDL and the rest of the PPP option, the non-forgiveness portion. In general, SBA loans require personal guarantees, as we mentioned before. For EIDL, as long as the loan is under $200,000, there is a waiver on the requirement for personal guarantee. So there is another advantage there with the EIDL. And so I guess the message is for those of you who have not applied for PPP and or EIDL, you need to do it right away. We know that funding is going to go away. Carl has an excellent pitch on how quickly the fund is going to go away. Carl?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, obviously we're welcome for every dollar that we're able to get in disaster relief from the federal government, but we need to kind of, apply for everything that you can apply for. But assume that you're not going to get the money and make a plan for your business going forward. Come up with a plan to reduce or delay business expenses. Again, it's all about trying to minimize your outflows of cash right now because you're going to need that cash to restart your business. Many of you are likely to get assistance, but most businesses probably will not. When you look at how many businesses were impacted and how many dollars have been allocated, it's just a math problem that doesn't equate to each other. There's going to be people who do not get assistance. Hopefully there's additional rounds and we welcome that, but we just don't want businesses to sit idle and wait for that disaster relief. Business owners need to manage their way through it. They need to look hard at their business model and make some tough decisions on what they need to do to keep that business alive so that it can reopen on the other side of the stay-at-home orders. And the Florida SBDC at USF has a team of consultants available. We're happy to sit down and review your financial statements and help identify areas where you may be able to delay or eliminate some expenses. At this time, we encourage you to talk to your vendors, your landlords, your mortgage companies, your credit card companies, and see if they will allow you to defer or delay some payments until you can get to the other side, because the more cash you can keep in your bank account, the better you're going to be able to withstand this.
And so we've heard that some financial institutions are not participating on PPP. So we've listed several third-party lenders. So both Life, Fundera, Cabbage, Lendio, and SmartBiz are doing online applications. And so that might be a good opportunity. These links are actually active. So once you get the presentation, you should be able to click on the link and go straight to their website.
Javier, you probably didn't see it. It popped up during this call. I got an email this morning that was forwarded to me from the district director for the South Florida region for the SBA, and it had a list of about 50 small and medium-sized lenders who are participating in PPP. And I sent that to you, Javier, in email. If you want to include those bank names when this presentation is distributed to the callers.
Yeah, and we'll actually add it to our website at cfdc.org. We have a list of participating lenders in Polk County, and we'll definitely add those.
Yeah, and this one is specifically to the small and medium-sized lenders because, again, as you said yesterday, the SBA has created some exclusive times for those smaller banks in order to get their loans through the system. So there may be some names on that list that are different than what you have on your website.
Yep,
so
very true.
Again, the data is almost 24 hours old in COVID relief. It's older than it sounds. So we'll get it out there as quickly as we can. Right. But I don't know what the shelf life is because some of these banks may max out over time. The good news is there's about 50 on the list. So there's quite a few to choose from.
Thank you, sir. So permanent financing, again, that's your economic injury disaster loan. Make sure you visit the website, review your eligibility requirements. You need to gather all the supporting documentation. So I've heard people that have been going through nightmarish times trying to apply. Make sure you collect all the information ahead of time. So when you sit at the computer, it's an easy flow process. And unfortunately, and I know it's unfair to ask, but please be patient. Everybody's really trying to help. Even when the systems are not working, there are people working hard to try to make it happen for us, for you, for the small business community. So, so be patient, apply on their website and request the advance if you feel that you qualify for it. And then there is a phone line for SBA. I know they're answering the phone, but I hear of people that wait 20 to 40 minutes, and I've heard of people who have to wait 3 to 4 hours on the phone. So it's unfortunate, but it's a reality of our times. If you go to our website, it also has a link to the SBA webinars, and also SBA is opening some consulting, video consulting time in the Southeastern District. For individuals, don't give up on unemployment. And again, if your options are PPP and unemployment because you are a sole proprietor, you're self-employed, and you'll probably be able to determine that PPP won't help you much, and that unemployment may be a better option. So I would recommend that you look at both options, put pen and paper together, and determine what you're going to be able to get. So for instance, if PPP is going to get you, I had a conversation with someone 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she basically said that PPP was going to get her about $2,000, and she was considering unemployment. So, you know, if that's your choice, then you need to make the decision that's right for you. It's going to be hard for any consultant to tell you which is the right direction, but I think you have enough tools to be able to make that determination on your own. If you can't get through the website or the phone app, then fill out an application. There are plenty of organizations in Polk County that have the paper apps. Fill out a paper app. It's going to take longer, but it's worth going for it. If you can do it online, that'd be even better. And they're answering your calls, but of course it's being delayed, and the phone number is listed there. So Carl, do you want to go over this table?
Sure. This is just kind of a cheat sheet to kind of visually differentiate between the different loan programs, what the funds can be used for, what the maximum amount is, and the interest rates. You can see PPP has very limited use. It has to be payroll, rent, mortgage interest, and it's limited to just 2.5 times your payroll. Where an EIDL advance is $10,000, but the actual EIDL loan can be 4 to 6 months of your operating expenses. So that's why we said you can apply for both the EIDL and the PPP. And if you are approved for both, they'll just peel the 8 weeks of payroll costs that you got for PPP out of the EIDL loan, but you would still be able to get both loans. You just couldn't get paid, or you couldn't receive funding for the same 8 weeks of payroll from 2 different loans. So definitely apply for both. I think that was one of the questions in the chat. So the answer is yes, you can apply for PPP and EIDL. If you're blessed enough to get approved for both, the SBA will make that adjustment on the second loan in order to ensure that you're not double dipping per se. The EIDL loan, the advanced portion is forgiven, but the rest is set up as an amortized loan at a very low interest rate. And with the PPP loan, if you use the monies for as directed in the program, then that portion can be forgiven. And that would be that slide. And I think that brings us to the question slide. I did see some questions in the chat. There were some people that were confused about the different loan programs. Definitely encourage you to visit our website, excuse me, the sbdctampabay.com/polk. There's a button that says schedule a consultant. You fill out an online form and you can meet one-on-one with one of our consultants. It's absolutely no cost to you, completely confidential, and we can on a one-on-one basis help walk you through the different loan programs and look at your unique situation of your business and help lay out the options that you have to move forward. We have a team of about over 15 consultants in our region that are assisting small businesses. I just hired 5 people in the last 2 months to increase our capacity. We're taking some steps to bring on some additional capacity starting in May or probably mid-May. So we have people there, we have the resources there to sit down and guide our Polk County small business owners through that process. So please don't hesitate to reach out for assistance. That's what we're here for. And with that, I'll leave it, I guess, back to the moderator for questions, unless Javier has a closing comment.
Okay, thank you both. So we did have some questions in the chat. If you guys, you can feel free to ask your own question. We didn't have a lot of questions, so if you'd rather go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question if you still have a question that you'd like answered now before we end the call.
I have a question. I put the question in chat.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know, my CPA told me that the PPP loan had changed from the $10,000 grant to each employer receiving $1,000 per employee, and I wanted to know, was that true?
You mentioned PPP, but it sounds like you're talking about the EIDL cash advance. And the EIDL cash advance, my understanding was, and Javier might be more familiar with how it started, I think the $10,000 was the maximum advance. My understanding, it was always tied to employee count. Is that accurate, Javier?
Sorry, yes, I had lost audio for a few minutes. So I came back just as the question was being answered. So there was a question on the $10,000 cash advance?
Correct.
Okay. So the confusion came because SBA had originally set a $10,000 draw when they opened the EIDL program. And then they decided that they were going to change it to $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So in the beginning, many people got $10,000. But after they made that change, and look, these changes with SBA are a constant, okay? We have seen regulations change on a daily basis. So after that change, people start getting $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and they didn't know why, since everybody else had been getting 10,000. So I hope that answers the question, and that is through EIDL, not PPP.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead,
Yes, ma'am.
please.
Okay, as a landlord, which one of these, I'm confused, which one of these programs would be more feasible to apply for?
And so as a business landlord, or
Residential.
that is difficult.
What business entity is holding the property?
It's sole proprietor.
I'm assuming you don't have any employees connected to that. It's just
No,
that you're just holding the property.
No employees, right. It's just someone that rents the property.
Yeah, because the PPP is tied to employees, so that one would be off the table. I'd have to take a second look at the EIDL. I don't know that it would be a fit. Javier, can you jump in on that one?
Yeah, no, that's going to be a very difficult. I mean, you can apply for EIDL. I think the worst thing that we can do is not apply for something. But PPP wouldn't apply in this case, as Carl said. EIDL may be able to help you, but it's not necessarily a business. That's really rental income. And because it's not necessarily a business, it may not qualify for an SBA loan.
But if you're
Okay.
uncertain about the answer, can you find out and respond to that question so that we would know for certain?
I
About
can
the
try
EIDL,
to
if
get
you know about the
information.
EIDL.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I was asking because the occupants, they got laid off.
Right, but again, your rental property may not qualify under for SBA as a business. It's rental property, it's not a business.
A lot of times,
I can look up the SBA guidelines and send them out, but that really is a question for a CPA or for SBA directly. I'm not sure that I can guide you one way or the other. I can find regulations and send them to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a question from Eugenia Agard. She says that she applied to SBA for the EIDL loan about 3.5 weeks ago before she heard about PPP. Is this the same as PPP? Does she need to also apply for PPP? I think you've kind of answered that. She's confused. But she says she's a mental health. She owns a mental health private practice. She has an IEN number. She's a registered as an LLC. Please guide her. She's having mixed reports on what to do. She doesn't know where she's going with this. Lastly, who can we call for assistance to help with filing?
And so the quick answer is yes. If you have employees, you will qualify for both, and you should apply for both. PPP will help you for that 8-week period, and EIDL will help you for additional working capital. So even though you applied for EIDL, you should seek PPP with your bank. And your bank will help guide you through the application process for the PPP. So that's an easy one. For SBA applications, I don't know, Carl, is that part of consulting services?
We can definitely take a look at the company, but yeah, I agree with you. She's applied for the EIDL, which is great. And she is the sole employee of the LLC. depending on how she pays herself, she'll need to produce that documentation if she is a self-employed person, or does she W-2 herself, or does she take it as a draw? So there's some other factors in there. I definitely encourage you to maybe reach out and maybe have that conversation one-on-one with your banker or with one of our consultants. But yes, you should apply for both. I just can't give you a definite answer because business owners have different ways of paying themselves. And sometimes that lists them as an employee, and sometimes it doesn't, depending on how they're paid themselves.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I think I was able to unmute my phone. It was pushed in the corner there.
It's difficult, Eugenia, it's difficult to hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Speak up. Yeah, louder.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for reading my question, dear. So yeah, in terms of paying myself, I don't have a payroll because I'm the sole practitioner there, but I put all my funds in my Chase account after each payment, or after everybody pays, I put it in there. So all my funds are accounted for. I'm very diligent with that. So I'm wondering how I can move forward. I don't use a payroll system. I just deposit the funds in, check or cash, whatever way they pay. So I don't have a payroll, so I was wondering how I would go about that.
I missed the beginning of the question. So are we talking about, are you a sole proprietor, or do you have consultants or?
She's an LLC where she's the sole employee, but it sounds like proceeds from the business all go into the business account.
Yes.
And then I'm assuming as you need funds, you pay funds or pay yourself out of that account.
Yes.
It sounds like as a draw on the profits. So that would be drawing the monies down as an owner versus an employee. So that wouldn't you're still qualified for EIDL, the idle loan, but that may be a problem with the PPP because you have to produce your payroll. You need to be able to show what 2.5 times your monthly payroll is. And in the scenario that you just shared, you don't have a monthly payroll.
Well, you could use draws. So you could take your annual draw and divide it by 12. So if you've paid yourself very little, you may not be able to take full advantage of PPP.
I don't pay myself, and I think that's why I need to stop doing that. I don't pay myself. I put it in the account. I don't actually pull out. I just pull out for bills. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In that case, then if you have zero payroll, it's really zero PPP, and your option.
I'm the employee, though.
I beg your pardon?
Quite so tricky. I am the employee, so I'm. The money the patients pay me. It's going to me. I'm being paid, so that is like payroll. However, it's not a payroll company. I'm putting the money into the account. I'm accounting for all monies. I'm very diligent with that, and then I use that money that they pay to pay my rent where I'm at, and I'm actually paying rent right now, and I can't even go there because I'm not seeing any patients directly. I mean, it's a close proximity to people. You cannot be 6 feet away in that setting. So I've lost a substantial amount of income. I am seeing some people via telehealth, but everybody does not believe in that, and they're uncomfortable with being on a computer to produce therapy sessions.
Yeah, if you're not paying yourself, then you're the owner, not an employee. And
in the scenario that it
getting draws.
Yeah, for the scenario that it sounds like to me that the patient is paying you a fee for the service. So she's paying the business for services received by the business. So that's not considered payroll to you. It's when the monies that are received by the business for service are then expensed out as a paying you from the business to you is where that would be, a payment. So if you are taking a draw, and that might be a conversation to have with your bookkeeper or your CPA, because they'll know exactly what way you're pulling money out of the business and how to document that for the PPP application, because as Javier said, if you can document that you've taken out X amount of dollars for the year, you can break that down to determine what your monthly draw was, even if you didn't have a paycheck each month.
Wow, okay, yeah, 'cause I pay taxes, like I just had to pay $3,000 at the last tax season. So I pay on the money that I am getting. You know what I mean? Like I pay money on taxes based on the money that I receive, and it's just so crazy.
Yeah, I would have to loop in your bookkeeper or your accountant, because those taxes may be business taxes and not payroll taxes. It's just really hard in a webinar environment to really drill down and get a definitive answer without knowing all the details.
Okay, so thank you so much. Do you recommend that I call someone for further discussion?
Yeah, you can definitely visit the SBDC website and just click to schedule a consultant.
Sure.
And you can meet at no cost with one of our consultants. And then they may be able to gather some more information so that they can give you, what your options are.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate all three of you providing this information for the community, because everything that I learned, I disseminate as well to the community. So thank you.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
Okay, we have a question from Pastor Eddie Lake. He wants clarification. Did you say that the personal guarantee is waived for the EIDL?
Up to $200,000, yes.
I have a question. I know you listed some additional lenders. Is PayPal included as one of those? I think I saw that somewhere.
It is. PayPal is included now, yes.
Okay. If someone was receiving unemployment prior to all of this and they were getting the $275 a week and they were working part-time and then now they're no longer working part-time, do they have to reapply so they can get the additional $600 a week also? How does that work?
Unfortunately, state unemployment benefits is not my forte. I don't know, Carly, if you can comment on that.
It's an area that we serve the business community, so it's not an area that I'm very familiar with, other than what I've read in the newspaper and seen in the news reports. So I don't feel comfortable answering that question because again, we're focused on business services at the SBDC. That is, I would say maybe Career Source Polk or the DEO website might be able to answer that question, because they're more. That's something that's in their wheelhouse, I think.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There's another question also from Dr. Wilcox. Should part-time tutors apply for unemployment? Was that the one you referenced, Jill, already?
Well, I didn't reference that, but they may have addressed it. I'm not sure though.
Same unemployment or the PPP. Yeah, we can probably address that one next week when we have the accountant and the CPA on next Tuesday. Okay.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Thank you for those who are joining us live on Facebook as well. Any concluding thoughts, Javier or Carl, that you want to share with us before we conclude the meeting?
The only thing I can say is if you have not taken the first step into applying for PPP or EIDL, you should seriously consider, you should do it sooner rather than later. Please don't wait anymore. Funding is limited and you want to get your application into the system as soon as possible.
And my comment would be that, and I know I speak for Javier as well, the Florida SBDC at USF and the CFDC, we're members of this community. We're all in this together. We're not a soulless, faceless organization at the state or federal level. We're here every day, trying to help small businesses and trying to decode and demystify the information as it's coming down from the federal government. And, I just appreciate, as Javier asked earlier, for patience and understanding. An answer that we gave to a question 2 weeks ago may not be correct today, because as Javier said, the programs are morphine, and I appreciate the opportunity for Javier and I to come on and answer questions and help clarify some of the programs that are available right now. But I thank you guys for the chamber to put this information out there to your members.
I do have one last.
Go ahead, Jill.
Okay, I do have one last question regarding the funds. I know that for the second round, that some of these monies were targeted specifically for minority-owned businesses. How is that being monitored or tracked? What percentage of those funds, and how is it being monitored?
And so the 60 billion portion of it, that's targeted to small and community-based lenders, is the one portion that I mentioned that they actually had a window for their own applications yesterday, and that's going to be tracked. So in a sense, the way they did it was to find those institutions that are traditionally not SBA lenders, but they're community-based, and ask them to take part of the program. So that is the good news. Now, the bad news is that because they are not used to dealing with SBA, then they're asking a lot of questions because they are the ones putting up the money first, and SBA is putting the guarantee later. So if they make a mistake, they may not be able to collect on their funds and from the SBA. And so that's become an issue. But they're working through it. We saw how responsive the SBA was in the beginning with traditional lenders, and I think they got a good idea of what they need to do to ease concerns with the community lenders.
Yeah, from what I read, Jill, I think it was your question. From what I read, the way the SBA is doing that is they're targeting, as Javier said, they're targeting banks that serve those communities. Because I don't know that they have a way at this volume and in this time period that we have to work with to target individual lenders. So I think what they're doing is they're trying to divert monies into banks that serve those communities in order to make those funds more accessible to people in those communities.
Okay, so in an area like Polk County, we're not a real urban area like Tampa and Orlando, probably don't have those types of financial resources here. So for those, or is there a list of those banks that in this area that serve the minority communities that the monies are going to?
I don't know if there's a bank that serves specifically, but I did, as I mentioned earlier, I sent a list to Javier that came from the district director for the South Florida region of the SBA, listing all the small and medium banks. And I did, as I was scanning the list, did see that the BBIF was on that list. The Black Business Investment Fund was one of the banks listed. So I think, and I'd have to, again, I have had this list for a couple hours and I haven't really spent much time with it. But I do know that there are a lot of small and medium-sized banks. I'm looking at the list now. One is like the First National Bank of South Miami. So that I'm assuming that bank is probably in a community that would be able to take advantage of that. I'm just scrolling through looking for some other.
Are you able to share that list with us, Carl?
Yes, I sent it to Javier so he can include it with the presentation that's going to be sent out. So yes, it will be distributed. And it has a list of all the banks and the bank phone numbers that are listed as part of that. There's a Sunshine State Economic Development Corporation, all kinds of stuff in there. I don't want to go through all of them because I'm not familiar with all of them. It's not my list. It literally came out yesterday. I think last night, I think is what the timestamp said when it came from our SBA district director.
So Javier, how soon can we receive that so we can get that out as well?
Within the next 10 minutes.
Okay, super.
I'll send it to Jill, and Jill will send it out to everybody.
And copy me on that as well.
Okay.
I'm Doris. You should have my address. I contacted you initially 2 weeks ago when you were presented. But if not, you or call. And if not, Jill can forward that to me. But my question regarding the SBA, I put it inside of the chat early on before we started around 3. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to read that, but you spoke about the changes that happened just drastically. And so as the second round of monies were coming out, the article states that Sunday night that there were some changes by the SBA, which meant that the larger banks received the larger portions of the dollars and the smaller banks did not or will not. So according to your list, you're saying that's not correct.
So the SBA had allocated, or Congress had allocated $60 billion for smaller banks.
Yes.
And so the idea was to prevent the larger banks from gobbling all the money for their larger customers. It's hard to tell how this all works. And I don't think we're going to see actual reports because the program just opened on Monday at 10:30 a.m. and by 1 p.m. the system was not working.
Right.
So that's how bad the situation has been. But I think large companies are being more careful now. A lot of them have been shamed publicly for taking the funds, and many of them have actually opted for refunding the PPP or EIDL advances that they got. So I think decency has become more of an issue now.
Okay.
If I may say it that way.
All right, Ms. Moore Bailey.
Yes, well, thank you both for that. And also, I'd like to just FYI everyone, on Tuesday, we'll have another town hall and we will have a CPA accountant out of Tampa. He's going to provide information with us regarding the taxes and the expansion of that. So stay tuned for that. I just put his information, at least his website link in the chat. You can look at that, and we invite you to call in again. You'll receive the link from that later on, probably tomorrow, I believe. So you'll have that. And thank you again for this evening, Javier and Carl as well.
All right, and one last
Thanks,
thing,
everybody.
just want to encourage anyone and everyone who owns a business to please join the chamber. Today is the last day to get 15% off membership. It's on our website. That's www.taaccpc.com. Once again, thank you. And that does conclude our meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.